Week 16 of the NFL season. We've been with you for every game of the NFL season for the last 3 years with Eric. How crazy is that right here on this show? Eric, buddy, I know you're dealing with lots of crazy weather, but how's it going over there for you heading into the holiday?
Pretty good. We got Snowmageddon coming to Michigan, so it's gonna be interesting. So but I love the snow. It's gonna be a good time right at Christmas. So and got some football to watch, so I can't complain.
Yeah, this is going to be a strange schedule. So, for those of you who are joining us, because Christmas falls on Sunday this year, they are going to have a couple of games on Sunday, but basically the full slate is really going to be on Saturday. And then
Yep.
there's 3 Sunday games. We'll still have the Thursday game, we'll still have the Monday game, but we also have the NBA slate on Christmas Day. So, wow. Lots going on in the background while we're opening those presents and eating dinner with the family, huh, Eric?
Ton going on. Plus, we got the Hawaii Bowl, which is a Christmas Eve tradition like no other. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
And everyone's got to throw a nice little Christmas movie on in the background. Give me one of your favorites. What's one of your favorite Christmas movies, or one that you go to, each and every year?
Oh my God, I am so guilty. I love those cheesy Hallmark Netflix ones. The one that came out last year. Oh my God, I'm totally spacing on the name. Love Hard.
Love Hard. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. There's one that came out this year on Netflix that's good with Freddie Prinze Jr. That's super corny, and it's him and Amy.
Oh my God, I love Amy Garcia, dude.
Yeah. Oh, dude, you got to check this out. It's him and Amy Garcia.
I love that. That was a solid one. I've seen it.
Okay, great. Awesome.
I'm familiar with that one.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I myself, it's great with all the streaming services and stuff. You can makes it really easy for us. The other day, I'm such a dork. Like the way I do all of our work, I made a list when I was going through there today. I was sitting down, I was a little drunk, and I was going through, and I just started jotting down all the movies I wanted to make sure I watched over the next week. So as I've been doing all my work, I've been throwing a lot of stuff on in the background. I went through the Grinches earlier today, and we'll move on to a Christmas.
Me and my buddy were arguing about this one. Do you consider Uncle Buck a Christmas movie?
Yeah, I had Uncle Buck. I had it in a section of movies, like along with Catch Me If You Can. It ends at Christmas. Like there are some movies that aren't really Christmas movies, but they have some Christmas in them. So I did watch that one. I watched Die Hard. I watched Catch Me If You Can on that, like a movie that has some Christmas, but not necessarily about Christmas. So yeah. You know what? I threw it in there. I threw it in. It had its own category, but Christmas movies, love them. And hopefully all of you are enjoying some of those out there with the family. Let's see if Eric and I can keep you entertained and get you informed and get you all ready for NFL Week 16. So last week, Eric, we had, no hyperbole, one of the crazier weeks that we've ever seen in the history of the NFL. People will say that sometimes, and it's not really true. It was accurate last week. We had the biggest comeback in NFL history, a team that was down 33 points at half. We had a game end on something I don't think I've ever seen, a crazy lateral attempt that was intercepted by a defender and run back for a touchdown in a tie game. 12 of the 15 games leading into Monday were decided by one possession. 5 of the games were within one score of the final play. On the final play, there were 3 overtime walk-offs, 3 17-point comebacks, which is the most in a single week in NFL history. And a lot of the really good teams in the league didn't really look fantastic last week. The Chiefs had to get to overtime against the Texans. The Bills really struggled to get by the Dolphins. The Eagles had a close win over the Bears. The Cowboys lost to the Jags. And this year, Eric, and this is why you and I have done very well in the last couple weeks, the last 15 games with a double-digit underdog, the Dogs are 12-3 ATS.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird season. It's been a great season. It's been one of my more profitable season, and I don't know. I think the Vikings comeback had more to do with the Colts situation.
Absolutely. This is what happens when you have a group of guys that have never called plays before.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. They don't know how to run out the clock. We'll get to some of their mistakes, but they're just doing silly things in the second half that's just gifting the Vikings the ball back, stop the clock, just Really, really silly stuff.
And then in terms of um the Patriots game, my first thought was he didn't know what the score was.
I know.
Like
And he
that's the
said
only
it.
thing.
He
Like
tried. He said it after that he did, and that he just took the blame for it. But I've never. I don't understand. And why? Like even Stevenson. Like why did he even pitch the ball
yeah, it was
to
just a weird
start?
thing. Like a real
Not a
yeah,
Belichick type thing that you
just
normally
a
see,
real
right?
weird thing. And I will say this, Zappy would have made the tackle. That's all I'm gonna
That
say.
that was.
Zappy would have made the tackle. That
He's
Mac
got to
Jones
be
would have made it.
happy as you and I are recording on Wednesday. So we are recording this a little early this week. Just keeping in mind with in injuries and anything up to date last minute. So we're on Wednesday night. He's got to be happy with the score of his Western Kentucky team right now. They're up big in a bowl game as we record on
Oh,
Wednesday night.
yeah, I didn't see this coming. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
shocker. So
So let's dive in, Eric. Let's get to Thursday night football. We got the Jags and the Jets, and now these two teams are both in the mix for a playoff spot. Jacksonville is 6-8 straight up, 6-7-1 against the spread. The Jets are 7-7 straight up, 8-6 against the spread. We have the Jets as a 1.5-point favorite as we're looking at the betting lines over at Betfred Sportsbook. The Jags come off a walk-off pick six in overtime against Dallas. Now they're within a game of the AFC South title. Keep in mind, they beat the Titans the first time this year. They play the Titans in the final game of the year. So if they're within a game of Tennessee and they tie Tennessee, they've got the tiebreaker if they win that final game. The offensive line, though, is something we have to keep an eye on, Eric. They lost both the right and left tackle to injuries during Sunday's game. They still managed to run for 192 yards and hold off the Cowboys' pass rush to just 1 sack. But we got to keep an eye on those injuries moving forward. Another big game for Zay Jones. You've called a couple of his big games. He had 6 catches, 190 yards, 3 touchdowns. The defensive back Jenkins had an incredible game. 18 tackles, 2 interceptions, the first safety with 18 tackles in an NFL game since 2012. And Trevor Lawrence, man, this is a guy who earlier this year, he didn't look like he was progressing. He didn't look like he was taking the step forward that we wanted. He really had another nice game. Early interception at one point. After that, he led 3 consecutive touchdown drives in fewer than 9 minutes of game time. He did have a fumble late in the game, but he finished ranked as the number 2 graded quarterback on the week by Pro Football Focus. On passes in the short area, under 10 yards, he was 21 out of 23 with a plus 16% completion percentage over expectation. He's now ranked number 13 quarterback on the year in passing grade. The last 6 weeks, 5 of his best games have been during that stretch. I mean, he looks like a completely different guy. 70% completion percentage, his first his first 14 passing touchdowns, which are tied for second during the stretch, 14 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, and 111 passer rating. He's just been awesome as of late. So now they've got interesting schedule coming up, and they've got wins in 3 of their last 4 games. And Eric, the only game they didn't win was when they got beat up by your Lions. They were 1-112 coming into this year when they were trailing by 17 points in a game. And so far this year, they're 2-2 when they've been trailing by 17 points in a game. They've come back twice this year. They'd only done it once in their entire franchise history leading into this year. Talk to us a little bit about the Jags and the Jets. So who's playing quarterback this week for the Jets?
Unfortunately, Zach Wilson. I got the Jets. I played them on the money line here. Home teams week 14 to the end of the season, they are 65% straight up. This line's at 1.5, basically a straight up game. Lawrence only 35% covering on the road. Jags losing the offensive lineman, as you mentioned, is a big, very big to what they're trying to do, because we need to remember this Jets defense is 6 DVOA. So I think they're going to be able to get to Lawrence. Betting is all about buying low, selling high, as you and I always talk about. This is the highest the Jags have been valued all year. They beat the Ravens and in a double-digit comeback, and then they just beat the Cowboys at home in overtime.
Yep. And they beat the Titans prior to that. Those are 3 good wins in their last 4 games.
Lawrence is 2-13 in his career on the road. Jags are 28th DVOA on defense. I think they're going to struggle to start the Jets, regardless that Zach Wilson is playing. But the main thing is this, and we saw this last year when Miami on a short week went down and they played Miami. The Jags defense was on the field for 74 plays. And now you're traveling to a cold weather environment. You're a Florida team to play on the short week against a physical team in the Jets. We need to remember last year that happened to the Ravens. They traveled to Miami after playing over 70 plays. They just looked completely flat on the field. I think the same thing's going to happen here. I'll take the Jets. I bet the Jets money line. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think the Jets money line. This is the spot here, and it's like it's tough for the Jets because this is a team where they look like a young team. Honestly, when you really dive into their schedule, they have 3 straight losses, all by 1 score, and now they've lost 5 of their last 7 games overall, and all 5 of the losses by 1 score. Back-to-back losses were to the Patriots, and then their last 3. I mean, they could have won all 5 of those games.
Yep.
Honestly. And it just shows you when you make a couple mistakes here and there. You know, Mike White was better, but even in the games he was in, just 1 or 2 things didn't go their way, and then he got hurt in the one game, and he wasn't quite 100%. And so, yeah, if they can get a little bit more from their special teams, like think about some of their recent games. They've allowed 2 punt return touchdowns this year. And both of those killed them against the Lions and against the Patriots. Even last week, they had a chance to tie the game. Greg the Leg, the one thing he can do is hit the long field goal, and he misses a 58-yarder. It's not like that's an easy kick, but he's supposed to be able to hit the long ones. It's kind of what he's always been able to do. Wilson made some big plays. He just is not really consistent enough to eventually be the guy for them right now. He had 7 plays of 20-plus yards. First half, no real big mistakes. He had 5 big-time throws, but 2 turnover-worthy plays. He'll take some shots, but he doesn't really have a rhythm. But this is a good spot for them, as you mentioned. They're a little undervalued coming off some of their recent losses, and because people are more down on Zach Wilson, everybody's hyping up the Jags right now. Let's take the Jets in this spot on the money line. This will probably be one of our 5 plays today as we move to the next game. So we move to Saturday, and there's basically a full slate on Saturday with 3 games scheduled for Sunday. We kick it off with the Falcons and the Ravens. Yes, the 5-9 Falcons are still alive in the division. They're only 1 game back, 8-6 against the spread. The Ravens are 9-5 straight up, 5-8-1 against the spread. This is supposed to be Lamar coming back, right?
That is what it looks like.
That was said a few weeks ago. That was like that had been said initially.
Tweeted out that Lamar was not on the practice field today.
So and remember that since it's a Saturday and we're recording on Wednesday, it's a shorter week. That's not good because that's normally your Thursday day where you see all the players on the practice field that are going to be playing.
Yeah, that's not a good indication that he's not out there. So with that being said, this number obviously is going to drop down if Huntley is a go. So if you do like the Falcons, now would be the time to kind of lock it in. I was very disappointed with what I saw from Ritter. I expected a little bit more. I was high on this kid coming out of school. He did really target Drake
London. That was good for London, right?
42% target share last
I think 11 targets. He caught 7 passes.
So maybe he's someone we can target in terms of, DFS. Harbaugh's only 47% ATS, as a favorite of 7 or more in the situation. But it's really hard to know, if you like the Ravens, you know what I mean? You kind of, and you don't think Lamar is going to play, you have to wait. If you Falcons, you have to lock it in now. This is one of the games I want nothing to do with.
Yep.
My thing with the Ravens is they don't know how to win.
No.
You go back to that game last week.
This time it was Justin Tucker. He never has a bad game. And Justin Tucker misses a 48-yard field goal, and then they have a 50-yard field goal blocked, and he's been automatic. And that was it's like, I know what you're saying. It's like they're finding ways to lose.
That interception by Huntley was bad. You're a road dog with a backup cornerback. Excuse me.
They have
First drive, you go
more
down the
total
field.
yards,
You
more
make
yards per play, but 2 turnovers in the red zone. And that's the difference between the game.
Yeah.
And they turn the ball over on downs after a 4th and 1. How are they so bad on 4th and short? It doesn't make any sense for
0 sense
for like a good running team. Then they had a 4th and 4. They couldn't get it. They turned it on over on downs there, and a 4th and 13 at the end of the game where they had to go for it and they didn't get it. One play drive that resulted in a fumble. And I mean, it just shows you they have Andrews, who has 700 yards receiving on the year. Who is their leading wide receiver this year in yards? Who would you guess?
Duvernay?
Robinson.
Oh,
Demarcus Robinson has 419 yards this year. They don't even have a wide receiver that's hit 500 yards this year.
Jesus.
And it just is really disappointing. And you said about Ritter on the Falcons side, he was just 13 of 26. He only hit 97 yards. He was not ranked well by the PFF passing grade. And then on the final play of the game near midfield, he kind of ran out of bounds. He did, like you said, get London involved. And as a team, they ran the ball really well. Still 231 yards, 5.9 yards per carry. I'm going to stay away from this one as we sit, out on Wednesday. Maybe we'll get a little bit more information on Saturday. You and I will be
interesting wide receivers. I'm looking at it right now. They could go after in the free agent market for next year, but they're going to have to play Lamar. I think their window's shut, to be honest with you.
You're right. This was a year that on paper, their schedule was great. They looked like this year was going to be a really good year for them. And it's one of those issues where I'm a big fan of Lamar. I think he's a great player, but when you play the way that he plays, you're always a little bit worried about getting banged up. And this year they weren't built very well offensively. Besides him, they had a lot of injuries, but they did not have a lot of good playmakers on this team really at all. They were like that's why, man, my fantasy teams this year were so bad in most leagues because I needed a big year from Bateman. I drafted Bateman like I was hoping that he would be a wide receiver 1 for them, and obviously he got hurt and was disappointing when he was around. But we move to another Saturday game. Let's go Bills and the Bears. Buffalo 11-3 straight up, 6-7-1 against the spread. The Bears 3-11 straight up, 5-8-1 against the spread. So we have the Bills, who have 5 straight wins now. They've clinched a playoff spot. They have a 3-game lead in the division with 3 to play. So that was a huge win for them against the Dolphins in a game where they were down by 8 in the fourth quarter. Pressure time came. They led a 7-play, 75-yard touchdown drive, a 15-play, 86-yard field goal drive. They win the game 32-29. And Josh Allen became the 3rd player in NFL history to have 300-plus passing yards in a game, with 4 passing touchdowns and 75 rushing yards. Because most of the time, the quarterbacks were either good passers or good runners, right? This is very new to have guys that can run and that are accurate passers. We just haven't seen very many of them throughout history. And it was a good win for the Bills. And even with some of their recent struggles, they're still 3rd in the league in EPA per play and in success rate. They're 4th in points per game, averaging 27.5. This team is starting to get really banged up, though, Eric. And this feels like kind of a nice spot, I think, for the Bears at home by more than a touchdown, because the Bills are coming off that big divisional game. That was a huge win for them. They got up for that game, the snow game. And now you got to go on the road and play a sleepy 3-win Bears team. And this Bears team is banged up too. We'll get to them in a second. But in their secondary in particular, Tre'Davious White has come back from injury. He has not been very good. He got torched a couple times against Miami. He's currently graded as quarterback number 126. And it's in 4 games, right? It's not like a cumulative average of stats based on the year. He's just being graded on when he's out there. And he's being graded at a 57 coverage grade in his average of 4 games. That's ranked number 126 of all the cornerbacks out there. Now, they've been able to play man coverage against guys like Mac Jones and against Wilson, and it can probably work this week against the Bears because Fields doesn't really have the receivers that are going to be out there. I mean, right now he has literally no receivers, but I still kind of like the spot here for the Bears. Now Miller and Hyde, a couple of the major playmakers on the defensive side, are out. And the secondary ranks 25th in success rate allowed when playing man coverage on third downs. They have no interceptions on key plays. They had a couple key mistakes that could have cost them in the game. They blew coverage early in the game. Later in the game, they got a stop, but then they roughed the kicker on a punt, extended the drive, and it led to a touchdown for the Dolphins. Then Allen got strip sacked, which ended up giving Miami a field goal. So there were 16 straight points for the Dolphins from when Buffalo went from being up 8 to down 8 in that game. I'm mentioning all the injuries for the Bills. You got to mention them for the Bears though too, right? Right guard Jenkins, St. Brown banged up. They were already missing a bunch of receivers last week. Can we get in on the Bears in this spot, Eric?
I locked him in at 9.5. Anything
over touchdown?
Yeah.
Are you still okay?
Yep, anything over a touchdown.
Me too.
Reality of the situation is the weather is going to be brutal there. High of 10. Wind's going to be 20 to 30 mile per hour with wind gusts up to 40. That's what weather.com is saying right now. Soldier Field is literally right on Lake Michigan. So those wind gusts are even going to be more because you get the lake effect right there. It's going to be a cold, windy day there. The Bills just beat the Dolphins. They have the Bengals on deck. Reality of the situation is whoever wins that game is going to have home field advantage in the AFC. So that's a very big game for Buffalo coming on deck. Since Von Miller went down, this Bills team is only 21st DVOA against the run. So they're not stopping the run. What did the Bears like to do with Fields? They like to run the ball. They are getting Herbert back, which is going to help this offensive attack. And the way to beat the Bears is throwing the ball. And if you're getting 40 mile per hour wind gusts, you're
not going to be able to do that.
You're not going to be hard to beat that secondary. And we've seen this the last couple of weeks against the Bears. They're just throwing out these huge numbers. And
the total in this game is only 40.
Yeah. And they're throwing out these huge numbers, like for the Eagles game.
Why is this different than last week?
Yeah.
Why is this different than the Eagles game?
They're constantly covering. So yeah, I bet the Bears at 9.5. I take them anything over 7. But this is my crazy thought for you. Okay, now just hear me out. Okay, we've kind of got ingrained in our head that we need to always take running backs. Okay. With our first round picks in fantasy football, right? Right now, the top 5 scorers in fantasy football are all quarterbacks.
I know.
Justin Fields, for the first 6 weeks, he averaged 12.9 fantasy points per game.
I know. You know why? Because I dropped him in week 5.
Since that Monday Night Football game, he's averaging 28.9 points per game.
I had him picked as like a because he didn't get drafted in most leagues. So he was just an end of the draft, like lottery ticket. So in almost every league, I picked him as a backup. And then by about week 4 or 5, I dropped him because their offense wasn't good. They were terrible. He wasn't doing anything and their offense wasn't moving. And then after the bye, they did like kind of what the Eagles did last year. They changed it, and then they just started being this power run team. And at that point, I couldn't get him back. And it was just like a little microcosm of it. And
my question to you is this.
How early do you pick him?
Closest player we have, okay, to, Michael Vick.
Yeah.
You look at the ADPs last year. Taylor, CMC, Henry, Cook, Eckler. Those were top 5s. Eckler's the highest one, and he's 10. Do we take, like, if I have the first round pick, do I take Fields? You know what I mean?
Because we take the running backs, and is it better to take someone who's safer earlier?
I know.
And he became the 3rd quarterback ever to rush for 1,000 yards. Last week, he had 15 carries for 59 yards. He had to run for it on a quarter of their offensive plays because in the first half, he got sacked 4 times. Probably should have been 6, but there were 2 that he literally busted his way out of. He ended up getting sacked 6 times, but he just had to take off on a bunch. So he's been sacked now 14.4% of times this year that he's dropped back. It's the highest by any qualified quarterback in the next gen stats era, which I think is 2006, like the last 15, 16 years or so. Looked like he got hurt in the fourth quarter, but he did come back and finish the game. I think it was just cramps. He has 70 plus rushing yards in 5 straight games. That's the longest streak by any quarterback since at least 1950. And yeah, for them, can they get a little healthier this week with Herbert? Can they piece things together and get someone out there to make a play or two? But like you were saying, their injuries to the wide receivers may not hurt as much in a game like this where they're not going to be throwing the ball all that much anyways. Right?
Yeah.
They may not stand out as much when both teams are going to have to run the ball if there's massive wins on both sides. Yeah. So, we're on the Bears side plus the 8.5. Eric got it a little bit better. We're both on it at plus anything over the 7.5 would be the number I definitely would want to try to get. Bengals, Patriots. Bengals are a 3-point favorite on the road, 10-4, 11-3 against the spread, 7-7 straight up for the Patriots. They are 7-6-1 against the spread. Lots of positives for the Bengals. They won their 6 in a row. They won 8 of their last 9. They came back from 17 down in the first half, and they won by double digits. They now have a 1-game lead over the Ravens in the AFC North. An impressive second half for them after they were sloppy and out of it early. They had 4 second-half touchdowns, and they were all off of Tampa mistakes. 4 consecutive turnovers from Tampa. They capitalized on short fields. They scored 34 straight points. Now, they took what was given to them. You can't really knock them for that. But when you start to dive into their scheme overall and their metrics, the game didn't quite look as good as a couple of their prior ones. They averaged just 5 yards per drop back. They didn't complete a single pass of more than 15 air yards. And they only had 45 yards combined between the running backs on 18 rushes. They're not really getting a bunch of the big plays like down the field, which is surprising with this offense. They rank 28th in the league in average depth of target for Burrow. It's quicker, shorter throws, and that's why they're avoiding sacks, which is good. It keeps them from, negative plays, but sometimes it's hard to sustain really long drives, especially if you don't have the run game working to help those long drives. So they got to be better about their slow starts. They had 3 3-and-outs in the first 28 minutes of the game. Couldn't figure out the blitz from Tampa. They were down by 17. And this was the 3rd time in the last 4 games that they didn't score a point in the first quarter. And it wasn't just the offense that started slow. The defense was also struggling. They allowed Tampa chances to score on 4 scoring drives in 4 possessions. 2 touchdowns, a field goal, and then a missed field goal. And 3 of those drives were 10-plus plays that went at least 67 yards. They really weren't getting anything in the pass rush early, and the coverage was soft. They were getting destroyed on play action. They actually dropped an interception in the end zone. It was a pretty good performance, though, all things being said, from their team, because they were missing Hendrickson, Hubbard, Hilton, Awuzie, Taylor, Britt, all big parts of the defense there. And they were down early in that game, and they very easily could have just sort of packed it in. But Burrow is the highest rated quarterback in the red zone this year, 21 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 112 passer rating. Eric, I do not like this Patriots team at all. I think they're overvalued. I think almost all of their wins are bad wins this year. I don't like Patricia. I don't think their staff is very good. They had a horrendous loss last week on that final play of the game. That's honestly one of the worst losses I've ever seen and one of the stupidest plays I've ever seen in the history of the NFL. But I think because of that, they're a little undervalued, and the Bengals right now are about as high as they've been. Now, this number has moved a tad, right? It's actually moved in the direction of the Patriots from 3.5 down to 3.
Yeah, I got it at 3.5. Real quickly before I dive into this, I saw this video on TikTok where this guy on NFL Network, he said anytime a coach gets called, he always he always texts the coach and he's like, hey man, you never need anything from me, just let me know. And he said that normally coaches never respond to him, but he said Judge sent him a text message and he goes, yeah, if you could do one thing for me, next time you guys start razzling Daniel Jones about him not being any good, he's better than most people think. Like, which I kind of thought that was kind of cool. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
That
know.
is cool.
That was
I agree with you.
I thought that was kind of cool because
Me too, because most people take shots on the way out.
yeah,
And
he kind of stood up for Daniel Jones. That kind of tells me like a lot about Judge as a person. He may be a crappy coach, but at least
I
as a
agree.
person, he's good.
I agree with you. Yeah, that's cool.
I said it before, buying low, selling high. Teams on a 6-game winning streak like the Bengals are 48% against the number. Belichick 71% against the spread after this loss. Bengals second straight game on the road. Mentioned before, they play the Bills. Whoever wins that game, home field advantage for the AFC playoffs. I think this is a classic flat spot look ahead. And let's face it, they should have lost last week. You mentioned those four turnovers, but also they averaged less than 4 yards per play. They only averaged 3.8 yards per play.
And what was Tampa in that game?
Tampa was over 5.
Yeah, they got destroyed by a lot of the metrics, dude. They had 4 consecutive turnovers, and then there were 5 possessions because the fake punt that they botched too. 5
and
straight.
That one, like Brady just let go of the ball. It was just a weird game.
It was.
Bucks outgained them by almost 200 yards. I love the Patriots here. Classic flat spot. I took them at 3.5.
Yeah, I'm fine with the Patriots. Yeah, I'm fine with the Patriots at 3 here. I think the Bengals are just a much, much better team, but this just feels like a great spot. That lateral attempt, I've never seen anything like it. It made no sense when you're tied. He said, I thought I saw Mac Jones open. What? Even if he's like, you're throwing it to Mac Jones, who's one of the most unathletic quarterbacks, like 30 yards across the field, and you think he's going to run for it or do something? It just, all of the thinking was absurd. And you know what's crazy is they would have been the 6th seed had they won that game. And that dropped them out. Now they're out of the playoffs on the outside looking in. So they really need to win this game to try to battle for the right at the back end of a playoff spot. They're right there in the mix, at 7-7 with the teams that are 8-6 and the teams that are right behind them on their heels. This has not been the only time they were kind of sloppy this year. Last month, they get the Vikings, kind of a big sack instead of throwing the ball away. They haven't been quite as sharp. I think Belichick's going to be on them this week. They were down 17-3 at half. They came back to take the lead. They were up 24-17. And keep in mind, not only was it that absurd lateral, Eric, that guy was out of bounds on that touchdown from the Raiders. Right before that. I don't know how they called that. And I like I said, I don't like the Patriots. I'm not trying to stick up for them, but that shouldn't have been a touchdown.
No,
he was
definitely out.
He was out of bounds.
I even tweeted it out. Looks like he's out to me, and then they reversed it. I don't know. My whole thing is there's always these calls this year. I just don't understand how they cannot just get it right.
Be better with as much money as being bet and fantasy and now gambling sponsors. They just got to be sharper.
Let me ask you this. Me and my buddy were talking about this the other day. Are former officials allowed to work for a team? Because I don't understand, why doesn't
somebody they get a consultant?
Ed Hockley.
Hockley, absolutely. You're right.
Okay, should we challenge this play? You know what I mean? Just that way they know what they're doing. I
completely agree. Is it someone on your staff that just an extra set of eyeballs that can help you in those situations?
And who needs to be an official? Does
a smart person.
Nico does for Fox. Just someone there.
Dean Blandino. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Who, challenge this. No, just let it go. So I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, we're on the Pats here at plus the 3 on this one. Now, keep in mind, we're fans of the Bengals team. Eric bet them to win the whole thing, but it's all about spots each week, buying low, selling high, as Eric likes to say. Eric, buddy, how about your Lions right now? They are a 2.5-point favorite on the road against Carolina. The Lions are now 7-7 straight up. They are 10-4 against the spread. Carolina is 5-9 straight up, 7-7 against the spread. The Lions, every week, we all have different ways that we do our prep work. I'll watch the games on Sundays and I'll kind of make a few notes and like some tweets or favorite things that I see out there that are interesting tidbits. Then I go back on Mondays and Tuesdays. I'll rewatch the games and take my notes throughout the games, things that jump out at me. Then I go to kind of Football Outsiders and PFF, a couple other articles I'll read through and sort of jot down anything that jumps out to me and matches what I've seen. And the Lions each week, my page of notes has been growing for them more and more. I always know when a team is doing either really well or really poorly because I've got a bunch of notes for them. And man, this Lions team last week was another game that they wouldn't have won, right? Normally, they would have lost that game. They just had a couple big plays in that game, a punt return for a touchdown, a 4th and 1 huge touchdown run from Brock Wright right after he had just dropped a catch, which should have been. They're now 6-1 in their last 7 games. They're number 9 overall in DVOA. They're a top 10 team in schedule adjusted efficiency. Now, their offense is number 6. They are 4th in the league in yards per game. They are 6th in net yards per play. They have the 2nd lowest sack rate in the league. They are 3rd in red zone conversion rate for touchdowns, over 70%. Even their defense now, they're out of the bottom third or so. They're out of that bottom 10. They're 22 in DVOA. Opponents have run for just 72 yards on 39 carries against them in the last 2 games, 1.8 yards per carry. Their special teams is even good. They're a top 10 team. They're number 8th in DVOA. Recently, they have a punt return touchdown, a fake punt, and they had a 66-yard punt. They're 2nd in the league in punt return average and in kickoff return average. And their kicker, Badgley, is 15 of 18 on field goals since taking over. Now, they were down by 4, midfield, and you get the tight end wide open for a 51-yard touchdown on a fantastic play call.
The best part is CJ Mosley was talking trash, and he told the guys on the offensive line they sucked. And that was his guy that scored the touchdown, the tight end, which
That's great.
Which made it even better. So,
man, you got to be excited right now for your squad. But again, like we're talking about teams that are high and low, right? This is a high spot for them on the road, favorite like this.
I am so effing nervous about this game.
I know.
Last month, last 4 games, so last month of football, Lions are the 3rd best team per DVOA. But I took the Panthers plus the 3. I know people assume Charlotte, warm weather, 32 miles per hour. No, it's 32 miles an hour, 32 degrees at game time. So it's going to be cold. Goff, California kid, he is 25% ATS as a road favorite week 15 or later. So, playing those cold games later in the season outdoors, he struggles. Road favorite in an outdoor stadium, just in general, at any point of his career, he's only 39%.
Well, and keep in mind, those games were with the Rams too, because he wasn't favored with the Lions last year, right? So those were
a handful of games, like against the Bears. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and those were games where he was on a really good team too. Yeah, that they didn't play well.
Lions have covered 8 straight games. Okay.
Just go to that regression to the mean. It kind of just comes at some point.
Teams that have done that are 40% ATS. It's just, what I mean? There's
you can feel it.
Trends. There's like this buying low, selling high. And who knows? It may land on 3. The Panthers.
Because I need that. I will say, as a totally, I like your Lions. I'm rooting for them to make the playoffs. I've been very high on them throughout a lot of the year. I need the 3.
Yeah, it dipped up to 3. It opened at 3, immediately dipped down to 2.5. There was some buyback on Detroit, dipped up to 3. There's like a 4-hour window. I was able to lock it in at 3. I've seen it on Betfred. It's dropped down to 2.5. At the 2.5 number, I wouldn't bet it.
Yeah, I'd stay away. I need the 3 on Carolina or 3.5.
If you can get the Panthers at 3, I would totally lock that in.
So last week, they couldn't get a lot going early in the game, the Lions. They had 3 drives in the red zone that got stopped and only had 6 offensive points until that last drive. But they have just finding ways to win. Because for them, their offensive line has been one of their real strengths throughout a lot of the year. They kind of struggled a little bit last week. They got penalized 5 times between three of the offensive linemen. They struggled a little bit in pass protection because the Jets defense is pretty good. And only one team all time has made the playoffs after starting 1-6. It was the 1970 Bengals. Now, keep in mind, the playoffs are now expanded, so more teams make them than throughout a lot of those years. So we're going to probably see teams that have slow starts
And
make
also,
playoff runs.
Lions are starting to become more mainstream. People are talking about them. This is just a selling point. But real quick, Frank the Tank, Frank Ragnow made the all program, all pro, whatever. There's not even a game anymore. I do have to give a big shout out to the best offensive line coach nobody has heard of, Kurt Anderson. He developed Frank at Arkansas. Then he became the offensive line coach at Northwestern. He's about ready to have his second kid drafted in the top 10 in the last 3 years. And the fact that he hasn't got more of a mainstream job than Northwestern is absolutely absurd to me. Like, he's one of the better offensive line coaches out there that nobody knows.
3 straight wins in December for the first time since 2014 for the Lions. Now, on the Panthers side, they had been playing really well. They've been running the ball well, and they just couldn't get anything going on the ground last week. They ran 16 times for 21 yards. And now what was surprising to me, they didn't use as many of those heavy package run plays that we had been talking about that they had a lot of success with. Only a few of them in the first half. And they are 0-7 this year when they fail to run for at least 100 yards. They allowed 35% of third down conversions the last 4 games going into Sunday. They let the Steelers convert 12 of the first 15 third down attempts. And they only got 12 first downs in the game on 43 total plays. They had 209 total yards, just 4.9 yards per play. They went 4 of 11 on third down and only 1 of 3 in the red zone. They lost the time of possession by more than 12 minutes. They've been playing better. They're low. Lines are high. I would lean Panthers at the +3. At this number, I would stay away until you get the 3 if you do. Let's move to the Texans and the Titans. Big game here for the Titans, who are 7-7 now, Eric. They've lost 4 in a row, and they are just a 3-point favorite in this game at home. Texans 1-12-1 against the spread, but 1-12-1 straight up, but the Texans are 6-7-1 against the spread. Tennessee is 8-5-1 against the spread. This is their first ever 4-game losing streak under Vrabel, and now just a 1-game lead in the division up on the Jags. The Jags own the tiebreaker as of now, and they will play Jacksonville in the final game of the year, which will probably be for the division, unless they're 2 games ahead of the Jags at that point. Now, Henry was able to hit the 100-yard rushing mark. He also had 4 catches for 59 yards. He had 160 out of the 280 yards of total offense for the Titans, and they got a lot of the non-Henry offense on like the final drive. But this team is really banged up. This is like that point of the year, Eric, where it's week 16 and more teams than not are really banged up, and it's noticeable with the Titans. Tannehill was limping around out there. He had a tough time being mobile. He took 4 sacks. One of them was a bad one, and it was the fault of the left tackle. It was a 9-yard loss, and then it forced them to kick a 51-yard field goal, which they missed. If they don't get sacked, it's a much shorter field goal. And, offensive line is banged up, wide receivers banged up, quarterbacks banged up. They need their defensive linemen back. Just a lot of issues. But a bright spot, we've talked about him now for a few weeks in a row. It's the tight end, Okonkwo. He led the Titans in targets and ran more pass routes than Hooper. 4 of his 5 targets for 54 yards. He caught second on the team in receiving yards. He's playing more snaps in 11 personnel. He even got a carry this week for 6 yards. He's actually the number 1 tight end in terms of yards per route run among those with at least 50. And Eric, this is the Texans team that you and I thought they would be coming into the year. And at the very beginning of the year, they had a couple games where they played well. Then they were awful for a stretch of games where they were tough to watch or bet. And now the last 2 weeks, they've played really well. And in games that they lost, but games that we were expecting to see from them this year where they were feisty and they would just catch teams napping, right? They caught Dallas a couple weeks ago as a 17-point underdog, and Dallas just was sleepwalking through that game. The Chiefs did the same thing last week. They could have beat both of those teams. And it's weird, the two quarterback stuff didn't work as well this week, but it's just a little tricky when someone's throwing two quarterbacks in there. It's just a little bit harder to defend because you're not quite used to it. You're usually, scheming for the one of them, and then they throw someone else in there that can run. It's a little bit more mobile. This was the seventh time this year where the Texans either had the lead or were tied to start the fourth quarter. 7 times, and they've only won one. And they were the worst. They were number 31. So one of the worst, the second worst defense in the league based on DVOA from weeks 1 through 9. From week 10 and on, they're ranked 11th in DVOA. And think about some of the teams that they played recently. They just played Dallas and the Chiefs. Those are two really good offenses, and they're still performing well. So this feels a lot more like the Texans that you and I thought they would be this year. They had a bad stretch, but this is Lovey now again, kind of coaching guys up at the end of the year, trying to coach guys up for a job and for some pride for next year.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think like the last 2 weeks, they're 12 DVOA. If those last 2 weeks were beginning of the year, just think how differently we'd be perceiving this Texans team.
Absolutely.
Obviously there's been a big move. Tannehill's been ruled out for the season. It's saying he doesn't look likely. Cheap plug for my live stream every Tuesday, which you come on and do a horse racing bet. A couple weeks ago, before they played, I told everyone to lock in the Jags at 10-1 to win the South, looking like we're going to be in a good position for those who tailed in that final week because they play against each other. I really wasn't a big fan of Vrabel not going for 2 at the end of the Raiders game. My thought process being this: Tannehill, your starting quarterback, was carted off. He miraculously came back on with the injury. You're down 7 starters on defense, and you have the best goal line weapon in the history of the NFL. Why aren't you going for, you know what I mean? Like, why aren't you going for the win there? I will never understand that this decision. Obviously, Henry, he averages over 150 yards rushing against Texans. Texans for the year, worst team against the run. Are they really going to be able to stop Henry? We've seen in Willis's 2 starts how much they depend on Henry. Are the Texans going to be able to stop the run? Vrabel,
so their quarterback situation now is Will, right?
Willis.
And I think they just signed like Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, well, it's going to be Willis. He's been there. Vrabel is 46% ATS as a home favorite. Key number is 3, though. If he's over 3, he's 42%. But as a short favorite, he still covers at a 54% clip.
Because that's basically like just winning the game most of the time.
Yeah. So I think this is a little bit of Willis went into Kansas City and covered the number. Willis went into Houston, covered the number. It's obviously easier to play at home. This still is the Texans, who don't have Pierce, who don't have Brandon Cooks.
And they made a little overvalued coming off of their 2 games where they played well against good teams. And we know the Titans are very undervalued. They would have been even with Tannehill coming into this game off of their recent slide. So this is another situation where I agree. If this is anything at 3 and under, I'm leaning Titans here.
Yeah, I would definitely lean Titans here. And who knows, it could drop even more. I think because it is a holiday weekend, we're going to see more volume from the general bettor. And this is kind of a game where we could kind of see this. So
yeah, kind of public money.
Yep.
Okay, let's move to next game where we headed. New Orleans versus the Browns. So we have the Saints. They're still alive. 5-9 straight up. 5-9 against the spread. The Browns are 6-8 straight up. 7-7 against the spread. Gosh, talk about 2 teams that have been playing ugly as of late. The Browns are a 2.5-point favorite in here. 32.5 is the over-under in this game. 32.5. Now, keep in mind, as we were talking about, Eric, crazy winter weather all over the place, like
Yeah.
snowstorms
I'm
all
reading
over.
chance of snow 40%, snow accumulations less than an inch. This is at game time on Saturday.
Yeah.
Winds could occasionally gust over 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
I mean,
And
and
Chubb is out, right?
well, Chubb is hurt. He
Okay.
didn't practice today, but they did designate their starting center to return, which is something really big. This number has been floating. It's been doing the dance with 2.5 and 3. Stefanski, home favorite, he's 37% ATS. When the line is 3 or more, that dips down to 27% ATS. I'm still not sipping this Watson Kool-Aid. Everyone said he's back after that
No
last game.
way.
18 for 28, buck 61. Really wasn't that impressive. Dalton against the spread in 1 p.m. games. We've talked about this with certain quarterbacks when they're kind of hidden and there's not the limelight on them. They do cover the number. He's 54%. Against the Browns, and now I know a lot of this was when he played for the Bengals, 63% ATS. Cleveland's 31 DVOA defending the run. So
they are miserable defending the run. And let's dive into those a little bit more. They allow 5.1 yards per carry on first down. They allow 6.2 yards per carry in the third quarter. And they allow 5.7 yards per carry between midfield and the opponent's red zone. They allow 6 yards per carry when the opponent has the lead. They've allowed 55 plays this year, rushing plays of 10 yards or more. So if teams can't throw and you're forced to run, I don't know how good that is for Cleveland trying to defend that.
Yeah. And the flip side, Cleveland doesn't have Chubb, which is going to be a huge blow.
And New Orleans even has the option of throwing in a guy like Hill if they can't throw the ball, right?
Yeah,
and who can just run.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely lean Saints here. I mean, at 2.5, I wouldn't do anything. If this gets to 3.5, I'm gonna take the Saints. But
because last week, look at the Browns' wins so far with Watson. The Texans, where they didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game.
Mm-mm.
And then last week, Baltimore was 0 for 2 in red zone trips, 0 for 3 on fourth down, and 1 for 3 on field goals. You're not going to normally have Tucker missing 2 field goals and going 0 for 3 on fourth down and 0 for 2 in the red zone. And I mean, do we credit the Browns for some of that? Okay. But it's more a little bit of an aptitude from a Ravens team that we've seen has been really bad on fourth and short all year long. So, yeah, I'm not high on – the Browns only had 283 total yards last week. And Watson had 1 big-time throw, 0 turnover-worthy plays. It was fine. He was ranked quarterback number 13 on the week based on Pro Football Focus grade. It wasn't anything fantastic. I'm with you. I'm on the Saints side here. I mean, they got up by 14 early. They were able to hold on. They played against the rookie quarterback making his career debut, held him to just 97 yards passing. But I like that Kamara passed the 100-yard scrimmage mark for the first time since week 8, so get him more involved. And they also struggled against the run last week, though. They gave up 231 yards on 39 carries. So I'm still leaning Saints at plus the 2.5. Maybe this is one that we throw in for our 5.
I would wait, though. You know what I mean?
Because the number I don't love it is
Chubb comes in. This is gonna jump up.
Yeah, as it should. So I kind of agree with you. You wait till you get a little bit more information on there. Lean on the Saints for now. Let's go to Giants and Vikings. Giants are 8-5-1 straight up, 10-4 against the spread. Vikings are 11-3 straight up, 6-7-1 against the spread. Vikings come back from a 33-point deficit at halftime, the largest in NFL history. But they dropped overall in DVOA, even with the win, because it's not impressive when you really dive into how they won that game. They are number 25. They're the 25th ranked team based on the DVOA metrics. They are number 20 on offense, number 19 on defense, and number 30 in special teams. They have 10 wins this year that are by 1 possession. They rank 14th in EPA. The defense ranks 17th in EPA. They've outscored opponents by 2 points, meaning they rank 12th in the league in point differential. Another monster game, though, for Jefferson. 12 catches, 123 yards. He has 1,600 receiving yards this year. He leads the NFL. This was his 8th game with 100-plus receiving yards. He's averaging 115.9 yards per game. I mean, they were down 33-0 in the third quarter. They had a 0.4 win percentage probability. That was the second lowest win percentage for any team in the next gen stats era, including the playoffs. So the last 20 or 16 years or so. Let's give a little credit to Cousins. We rip him when he's bad. He had 417 yards and 4 touchdowns in the second half. I mean, he wasn't even perfect. He was 28 of 42. He also had a defensive pass interference call, but he still took 4 sacks and had an interception. In the first half, it was 30-0 before he got the first down passing in that game. Just unbelievable that they won that game. Then you have the Giants, who got a massive win. They were up 14-3, and they got a little lucky in that game. There were 2 different plays that looked like they could have been called penalties against the Giants, which would have been given Washington another set of downs. One was a penalty against Washington where McLaren looked like he asked the referee, the official, if he was lined up okay. The official gave him the thumbs up, and then they called a foul right away. And then on the final play of the game, it looked like it was pass interference or holding in the end zone. They didn't call it, but there were more things throughout the game that Washington could have done to win that. Still, the Giants probably got a little bit lucky in that one. Monster game from Thibodeau. Strip sack, he returned a fumble for a touchdown in the second quarter. Then he had a big stop at the 1-yard line. 12 tackles, a sack, a touchdown, 3 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hit, 3 run stuffs, and then 2 more quarterback pressures. This was the first win in primetime for our guy, Daniel Jones. He was 0-9 going into that game, but he was very good. He didn't produce a single turnover-worthy play on the night, and the key was he didn't get sacked. So his run numbers don't look fantastic. 10 runs, just 3.5 yards per carry, but he kept moving and avoided a lot of sacks and negative yardage in those plays. So it's a little bit better than it might look. And Barkley had a little bit more oomph this week. 18 carries, 87 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. Also had 5 catches for 33 yards. He was responsible for 11 of the 19 first downs by the Giants. Usually you don't win a game when you're 2 of 10 on third down, but they forced Washington to go just 1 of 10 on third down. So they were better than Washington in that game. Talk to us about this one, Eric. Giants, Vikes.
I'll be honest, I hate both these teams.
Me too, right? They're both way lucky.
I just really want to fade both of them here because of that. I'm not going to have a play. Just some stats. Cousins is a favorite, 48% ATS. Jones is a dog, 63. Road dog, 75. On the road in general, 69. Giants, 30th DVOA. I think Cook is going to be able to run the ball. I'm sweating out my under 1150 after last game. But just how both these teams won, I want to fade both these teams this week. And I hate the fact they're absolutely playing against each other. Minnesota's defense is an absolute nightmare. Offensive line, monster issues. Flip side, Giants can't stop the run. They're 30th DVOA. I don't know how they're going to stop the run. I don't know who in the secondary is going to be able to contain Jefferson. But then on the flip side, I like fading teams after they clinch a playoff spot. So there's so many scenarios I look to bet, and
all of them are negative on both of these teams.
Yeah, so I can't.
Yep,
I can't.
I'm staying away too.
So I'm just.
These are fades. These are 2 teams that I'll be fading likely in the playoffs. Let's continue down to Seahawks and the Chiefs. Seahawks. How about this? The Chiefs are a 10-point favorite in this one. Over-under is 49. Seattle 7-7 straight up, 6-8 against the spread. Kansas City 11-3 straight up, 3-10-1 against the spread. Seattle's really struggled as of late. But that game against the 49ers, it was 7-3, and Seattle was driving at midfield, and they fumbled the ball. And then the 49ers went down and scored a touchdown, and everything flipped. So think about it. If Seattle moves down and kicks a field goal, it's 7-6. If they go down and score a touchdown, they take the lead. And it's not as if the 49ers were lighting it up offensively. Geno wasn't quite as sharp as he had been earlier in the year, but it really was the offensive line that killed him. He got sacked 3 times. It probably should have been more. He got hit 9 times. Walker didn't look fully healthy. He had to limp off the field at one time. Metcalf got flagged for a couple of penalties, which really hurt them. They actually dropped an interception that they could have had a little bit of room to return. So there were a few things in that game that definitely bounced the 49ers way. And then on the Chiefs side, this is now the second week in a row they didn't look very good, right? I mean, really, they lost to the Bengals, and then they kind of had a flat game against the Broncos, and they had another flat game last week against the Texans. They're tied with the Bills for the best record in the AFC, but the Bills beat the Chiefs, and the Bengals beat the Chiefs. So the Bengals and the Bills both have tiebreakers over them if they end up tied with them. They had 2 fumbles and 2 missed field goals last week. Those fumbles led directly to Texans touchdowns. It was a huge part in keeping Houston in the game. They had 33 first downs, did the Chiefs, 18 for the Texans. 76 total plays, 58 for the Texans. 502 total yards to 219 for the Texans. 6.6 yards per play, 3.8 for the Texans. They won time of possession by 10 minutes, but this team wasn't sharp. They had 2 turnovers, 10 penalties for 102 yards. It wasn't Mahomes' fault. He was 36 of 41, 336 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had a rushing touchdown. At one point, he completed 19 passes in a row. He had an 87.5 completion percentage. That's the highest in an NFL game in history when the quarterback threw at least 40 passes. And this is not a good tackling team either. They're currently ranked 24th in Pro Football Focus tackling metric. Against Houston, they allowed the Texans to average 2.5 yards after contact, and they missed some chances for tackles behind the line of scrimmage or that would have been short of first downs. Was another big game for McKinnon, led the team in snaps, played most of the third downs, took the majority of the goal line in short yardage play. Pacheco played every first and second down snap in the first quarter. Then he fumbled the ball in the second, and he wasn't getting as much run for a stretch of the game there. It feels like a good spot again for Seattle, who has been pretty bad lately. They're a little undervalued. The Chiefs always get bet, and their lines always get pumped up a little bit. So, I mean, at 10, that would probably be my buy-in point at Seattle.
Yeah, I would like this a lot more if the Chiefs didn't go to overtime last week against the Texans. You mentioned Walker's health. We really don't know what we're going to get from him. Smith has struggled the last 2 games, hasn't gone over 200 yards. But with how bad the Chiefs defense is, it's really hard to trust them when they're laying these big numbers. 24th total, 19th pass, 21st in rush DVOA. Mahomes as a 10-point favorite or more, 33% ATS. And that just kind of goes back to the whole thing. Mahomes going to be overvalued and everything. Looking at the weather in Kansas City on Saturday, it's going to be 20, and sunny. So it's not going to be too bad. I just don't know if the Chiefs are going to be able to stop the run enough, if Walker is healthy, and who's going to stop Metcalf, who's going to stop Lockett.
So Lockett's out, I think, right, with the hand injury for this one game?
It's not official yet.
Okay, so keep in mind we're recording on Wednesday. He might be out with the hand injury, but you'll have a little more information.
I really want to take Seattle here, but I just don't know. My whole thing is this: with how bad they looked against the Texans, it's going to be film sessions of Reed just, of Reed telling them how bad they are. And now, now you're going against a Seattle team, which is on the downward slide. So if it wouldn't have been such a close game last week, I would be hammering Seattle right now. I guess the fact they won the overtime against the Texans, I guess that's why I'm not betting Seattle.
Yeah, because they kind of had a flat spot last week. Maybe they'll be a little bit sharper this week as we move to Washington and the 49ers. San Francisco is a 7-point favorite in this game, over under just 38. Washington 7-6-1 straight up, 7-6-1 against the spread. 49ers 10-4 straight up, 9-5 against the spread. The 49ers have outscored their opponents 89-30 since Jimmy G got hurt, but people are just pumping this Purdy train a little bit too much for me. He's looked good so far, but things have been going well for them. We'll keep an eye on this guy who was not perfect in college. In 3 games so far, he has 4 turnover-worthy plays, but if he had enough dropbacks to qualify, his percentage would actually be the worst in the league behind Zach Wilson, one of the worst in the league, right there with Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Heineke. That's going to impact this team in some way. Like he's a guy that does take some shots and make some plays that he shouldn't at times. He's been very good so far. But his average air yards per target, 5.5. That's the second lowest mark of any quarterback in the NFL. He's only thrown 3 passes 20 yards down the field. His passer rating over the last 2 weeks does lead the league, so he's getting a lot of buzz, but it's all short stuff. It's all scheme stuff. It's all design stuff, which is really smart by their coaching staff. Now, the defense, they've been really good. When they play with the lead and they know they can tee off on opposing quarterbacks, opposing quarterbacks have 6 touchdowns and 13 interceptions when trailing and playing the 49ers. 29 sacks, a 63% completion percentage, and only 6 yards per attempt. 49ers offensive line has been very good with the rook. They've only allowed 4 pressures on 28 pass blocking snaps last week. And Kittle, as expected, with a young quarterback, you go to the safety valve of the big tight end, the big target. You're not throwing the ball down the field a whole lot. You're looking for that big target in Kittle. He had 4 catches on 5 targets, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a perfect passer rating when targeted, and that's going to be one of the highest graded games of his career last week. On the Commanders side, tough loss for them last week. I mean, they were 1 of 10 on 3rd down. They had 2 bad turnovers that really hurt their cause. They fumbled away a chance to cut the lead, and it looked like they got into the end zone late in the game, but an illegal formation penalty and then a missed pass interference call on the 4th down pass that ended the game. They really did get the short end of the stick on 2 bad calls. Their defense is playing well, though. They held their opponent to just 288 total yards, so they showed up. You got to win a game when you hold your opponent to under 300 total yards. They had more first down, more total yards, more yards per play, but the turnovers, just 1 for 3 in the red zone, 1 of 10 on 3rd down. That killed them. Heineke did get pressured on 37% of his dropbacks, and he went 3 of 9 for 50 yards and lost 2 fumbles when under pressure. I feel like at 7, this is a number that I'm jumping in on Washington. They've got a little bit more to play for in this situation because they're trying to survive. I think this could be a very tough defensive matchup for the rookie here. And I think at a touchdown, I can jump in on Washington here in a game that has a really low total.
So my thing with Washington is this. Last week was their most important game of the season, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And who is their best wide receiver?
Terry Mack.
Why did he not get a target, his first target of the game, to the midway through the second quarter? He had 6 targets, 6 receptions. And it's not like the Giants, I believe 25th DVOA, again 24th, against the pass. Why aren't you giving him the ball? I don't understand why these like mediocre teams have these great playmakers, and in these big games, they're just not going to them. It's not like there's
what the Vikings do. That's one thing I will give them a lot of credit for. When they need plays, they just go to Jefferson. They throw it up and they let him make a play.
And I mean, for him to only have 6 targets, 6 receptions, caught everything coming his way. That's a Scott Turner problem. So in terms of this game, I locked it in off of openers at Commanders at 7.5. I'm hearing rumblings are going to be dramatically cutting back on CMC's usage. I think that's going to be huge for them because what CMC is able to do is take a lot of pressure off of Purdy And the touches he got last game, that was the most touches he's had in quite a while. I know the 49ers have the best defense in the NFL. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about their offense being able to cover this number against the Commanders defense, which is going to be the best that Purdy has gone against teams on a 5-game winning streak, 48% against the spread. This is the most games that Shanahan has covered in a row in his career, so he's due for some regression. He's 44% ATS is a home favorite. Look, I like the 49ers. I got them 11-1. I was on the hype train before all this thing started. You got injuries to Debo, possibly cutting back CMC's usage. I think if you can get 7 or higher, you have to bet the Commanders here. But if it's 7 or lower, I wouldn't do anything. I got the 7.5. I bet the Commanders.
I'm okay at the touchdown and at the 7.5 and over. I agree with you. I wouldn't play this at 6.5 as we move to the Eagles and the Cowboys. This one.
Oh, one more quick thing. Can we just stop now with the Heineke stuff? Like, he's not a starter in the league. Can we, I've been saying this for day one. He's in the same category as Minshew for me. He's a good backup. He's not.
Yeah, no, I think where he's better than the options they've had, right? And that's where people get a little bit confused. Like, I don't think he could be your guy. I prefer him to Carson Wentz, sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the guy that you want to have be your guy forever moving forward, as we'll talk about Gardner Minshew right now and the Eagles, because, yeah, he's a very solid backup, and this number right now is Dallas -5 because we don't know, as we're recording this, the health of Jalen Hurts. I can't imagine he plays in this game. Why would he?
Someone in one of my leagues that was in first place and banking on Jalen Sanders, I hope he does play
on Jalen Hurts, or the
just banking. No, I have Jalen Hurts, and him and Chubb were the main reason I'm in.
Why you got in? Okay, but health wise, what's for the Eagles here? They're in a weird situation because if they win this game, then they're clinched. They've got the number 1 seed clinched, and they could really have Hurts not play for a month if they wanted. With the bye and having a couple weeks off. But I don't know if that's always a good idea when he's been sharp and he's been in good form. If you want to have someone out for that long, Philly 13-1 straight up, 8-6 against the spread. Dallas 10-4 straight up, 8-6 against the spread. When these two teams played earlier in the year, Cooper Rush was playing for Dallas, so it's kind of hard to get a feel for that game. But Dallas was in that game till late. The Cowboys took a lead of 17 points last week against the Jags, and then they just stopped. Dak, again, was really good early in the game. Couple bad decisions late. 2 interceptions in the fourth, and 2 interceptions for the fourth time in his last 6 games. And what teams are starting to do now, they're attacking this Dallas team a little bit differently. They're using more screen passes, RPOs. Last week, Jacksonville had a couple receiver runs. It takes the pass rush away a little bit. You get the ball out of your hands quickly, and you can find some of the mismatches now in the secondary because the Dallas secondary is a little bit banged up. They lost 2 corners to IR. They have an injured safety. They have a linebacker that just got hurt. And Armstrong, who was having a nice year, he also got hurt. Now on the Eagles side, awesome game again for Hurts, but he was injured. He didn't throw quite as well, and now we're understanding why. But he did get his 13th rushing touchdown. That's the second most in the league this year, behind your guy from the Lions. It's the second most ever by a quarterback. Newton had 14 rushing touchdowns in his rookie year. Now, it was their 10th win against the team with a 500 or worse record. But they have a 3-0 record against teams with winning records, but those were the Cooper Rush Cowboys, the Giants, and the Vikings, who we don't really think are the greatest team in the world. So if the 3 wins against over 500 teams are Giants, Vikings, and Cooper Rush Cowboys, those aren't necessarily fantastic wins. Now, keep in mind that Dallas the last 2 weeks could have lost to the Texans, did lose to the Jags last week, and hadn't looked good against any of the AFC South opponents recently. They do still have a very strong defense, though. The Eagles and the Cowboys both have top defenses. Both of them are two of the best pass rush defenses in the league. The Eagles actually have 4 different defenders with 10 sacks. They're on pace right now to have 4 different defenders right now with 10 sacks. They already have 2 that have passed that mark. They have 55 sacks on the year, and they're not far off of the pace of 72 sacks, which would be an all-time record. Last week, it was the 5th time they've had 6 sacks or more in a game. And that's 1 game shy of tying the most by any team in a season. Minshew mania, baby. I mean, he's a fine backup, and you wonder if Minshew has a little bit of a boost because Minshew had some incredible things to say about Mike Leach. That was his guy. He loved Mike Leach. And the passing of Mike Leach happened, and now Minshew will probably get an opportunity to play in this game.
Yeah, like that's still really sad what happened to Leach, one of my favorite college coaches ever. The Cowboys, Dak just hasn't looked right. He's a lot more INTs. He's averaging only 247 yards passing the last 4 games. And even against the game against the Colts where they blew him out, he only threw for $170. That was more of the defense and the Colts shooting themselves than Dak and the offense looking impressive. The Cowboys defense, they're on the field for 70 plays, still playing that short week because you only have 6 days in between games. Are the Cowboys going to be able to stop the rushing attack of the Eagles with Miles Sanders and company? Minshew, he's not as established as Hurts is running the ball, but he can still do some work with his feet. Cowboys, they have some injuries in the offensive line, some injuries in the back. I think people have overreacted a little bit.
Completely agree. This is too high. Minshew is not bad. Like we said, you don't want him to be a full season quarterback, but he can move the ball a little bit. He was 6-6 a couple years ago with the Jags as a starter, with like a bad Jags team.
One guy talking to my buddy when this whole news started breaking out, whenever it was on Monday or whenever, that Hurts had the shoulder injury. His statement was, I like Hurts as the random 1-week starter way more than I like Minshew as the random 1-week starter way more than I like him as my season-long starter.
Absolutely.
At this number, I would look to get involved
on the Eagles side.
But yeah, I didn't do it. I'm not going to lie. I
haven't yet, but I would at this number. As we move to what's this, Saturday Night Football, I believe, with the Raiders and the Steelers. We have the 6-8 Raiders. They are 7-7 against the spread. The 6-8 Steelers. They are 7-6-1 against the spread. The Raiders, what a crazy game. They have a big lead. They spit the lead out, and then they come back and they win because they score a touchdown when it looked like their receiver was out of bounds. And then they get one of the flukier plays you'll ever see. Chandler Jones intercepts a lateral, runs over Mac Jones, and runs for a touchdown. They only got Adams involved for 28 yards last week. And where they're having a problem is, they can't get anybody else really involved. Waller and Renfro last week, neither had a big impact. Waller had just 3 catches, 48 yards. He did have a touchdown, so maybe their second game back, they can be a little bit better. Renfro had just 1 catch for 14 yards on 3 targets. On the Steelers side, they are a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Over-under is 38.5. They had drives in that game last week, 12 plays, 10 plays, 21 plays and 13 plays. Yeah, you heard it right. They had a 21-play, 91-yard drive that went 11 minutes and 43 seconds to open up the second half and basically take the entire third quarter. This is the longest drive in terms of plays and time of possession by a Steelers team in the last 22 years. It was the longest drive in terms of plays and possession by any NFL team this year. They completed 12 of their first 15 third downs, and they shut down a Carolina running team that had been really running well as of late. They held Carolina to a season low, 21 yards rushing on 16 carries. Probably the best game of the year for the offensive line. On 23 pass blocking snaps, they only allowed a combined 1 pressure. Now, what do we do with this spot here with this number? Steelers 2.5-point favorite.
I mean, this is a no-brainer to me. I'm taking the Steelers here. I locked them in at 2.5. You have a indoor West
Anything
Coast
under 3,
team.
you're okay?
Yeah, indoor West Coast team going to play in 9-degree weather with a potential of snow in prime time. And then you look at it like this. Tomlin 54% ATS, week 15 at the close. So as the season goes on, he does a better job covering the number. As a short favorite, 2.5 or less, 56% ATS. I know the Raiders have Adams, but I really do feel that Josh Jacobs is the engine that goes for them. When he goes, that's when the offense looks the best. Ever since Watt has returned, Steelers are 3 DVOA against the run.
And last week, they shut down a Panthers team that had been running really, really well coming into that game.
Raiders, one of the worst defense in the league. It's really hard to trust them. So you have that. And then you have like the tragic news of Franco Harris retiring. He was supposed to go into the Ring of Honor. Going to be the first offensive player in the history of the Steelers organization to get that honor. And he passed away the other day.
You're right. That's going to give them a little boost.
That's going to give them a little bit of a boost. An indoor team playing in 9-degree weather in a primetime situation. I just don't see it. What I mean? Getting Pickett back.
Carr was Fresno State too, right?
Yeah.
Right. He's not been a cold weather guy either. He's very Goffy in that sense. Like not a whole lot of cold weather games for him.
And getting Pickett back is just going to give a boost to this offense here. I absolutely love him. I locked him in at 2.5. Anything under 3.
We will move to Sunday. 3 Sunday games and then a Monday Night Football game. We've got the Dolphins -4 against the Packers. Over under in this game 49.5. Green Bay is 6-8 straight up, 6-8 against the spread. Miami 8-6 straight up, 7-7 against the spread. The Dolphins now have lost 3 straight games, and they are now 3 games behind Buffalo in the AFC East. They also don't have a tiebreaker against the Chargers, who beat them straight up. Tua was not very good again. He finished ranked number 32 out of 36 quarterbacks on the week based on Pro Football Focus passing grade. He had 1 big-time throw, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He completed 17 passes for an adjusted completion percentage of 67.9. But he's now dropped. He was like number 1 for a lot of the season in passing grade. He's now down to number 6, and his 2 worst weeks have come in weeks 14 and 15. 3 of his worst 5 weeks have been the last 3 games. They're not really getting much production from anyone other than the top 2 wide receivers catching the ball. Over the last 3 games, receivers besides those 2, 17 receptions, just 220 yards total. And there was 1 75-yard touchdown run in there. That kind of is an outlier. The offense did hit 400 yards, so that was a positive for them. They really leaned on the run game early, though. It was Mostert. He had 101 rushing yards in the first quarter, 67 of them on a single run. They ended up with 188 rushing yards. On the season, they only average 89.8, which ranks 29th in the league. They got to be better running the ball, and I think they can because their coaching staff is a good run coaching staff. But their offensive line had a better game. Like, it was a better effort from the Dolphins. We liked the spot for them. You and I were on them there. Now, though, it kind of flips back to where they're favored again. And I got to say, the coach I still think he's a smart guy. He's a little bit goofy now. I don't know if you saw last week when they interviewed him. It was going into the 4th quarter in this game. It was like a really close game, or he made a comment about the guy's jacket that the reporter was wearing. He said, like, nice jacket, because it was freezing. And the guy had a big jacket on and and the hood on. But it was weird. It was like, he was wearing a normal jacket that somebody would be wearing when it's freezing like that. It was just in the middle of this tight game against the Bills that you're playing. that's something that you're focused on or you're worried about. That's just like something you would say in like in an exhibition game. You know what I mean? Like it was really weird to me. I don't know. He seems a little bit quirky. We have a Packers team who comes in now with a small chance to try to, still make a playoff run and a playoff push. But their last couple wins have been more about the opponents, where the Bears made some mistakes late, and then they played a Rams team last week where, I mean, this Rams team, they can't move the ball at all right now. Talk to us about this one. I hate this game.
I played the Packers plus the 4.5 here. I look at it like this. We talk about buying those, selling high end teams. Dolphins on a 3-game losing streak. But teams that are on a 3-game losing streak that are laying 3.5 points or more are only 43% ATS. Packers defense, it's shockingly pretty good against the pass. They're 8th DVOA against the pass. Where does it struggle? Defending the run. Miami has shown us that even when they do have success running, they really don't commit to it.
They don't stay with it consistently. I know.
As much
they should.
As much as they should. Mozart was like on pace for like 200 yards, and they kind of kept feeding him the ball. I know everyone's going to say, well, Eric, you have a cold weather team going down to Miami. It's only supposed to be in the mid 50s in Miami. You know what I mean? This isn't like a 70-degree day in Miami. This is a 50-degree day, where we're going to get some rain. Rodgers is used to playing in
the Dolphins. Just had that
weather.
Huge game that they got up for. They had to get up for.
Dolphins defense just isn't what it used to be in terms.
They had a lot of travel, right? Yeah. They went back and forth and back, and now they're home.
Yeah, I like the Packers here. I don't know if Howard and Crew is going to be able to keep up with Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Lazard. Dylan banged up, maybe better overall, because that means Aaron Jones will get over 20 touches. I don't know who in the Dolphins defense is going to be able to stop him. I just like the Dolphins here. I locked them in at 4.5.
Or the Packers. You like the Packers?
I like the Packers at 4.5. Yeah. 4. It's at 4 right on Betfred. I'd still play that. Anything over 3 anything over 3.5. 3.5 or higher is a buy on the Packers.
This next game is just miserable. We've got the Broncos and the Rams here. Both of these two teams are 4-10, and this is a standalone game. Ugh. Oh, 6-8 against the spread. The Broncos, the Rams are 5-8-1 against the spread. You've got the Rams with Baker. He didn't look very good last week. It was a tough spot to play in against the Packers, but he didn't look good. He was one of the worst graded quarterbacks of the week. And just not going to sugarcoat it. He wasn't good. No player on the Rams team besides Cooper Kupp has more than 500 total yards. Akers has 440 now and 54 rushing yards. So he's close, but no other skill position player besides Kupp had even hit the 500-yard mark.
So it's safe to say my Akers under on everything is going to hit then? Is that what you're telling me?
I think you're looking good right now. The Broncos, on the flip side, hey, you know what? Ripien looked okay in the second half. And what I liked about what they did, they made some adjustments because they got sacked 6 times in the first half, but they only ended up getting sacked 7 times overall. They just started to run the ball a whole lot. It was all about Latavius Murray, 24 carries, 130 yards, 5.4 yards per carry. Also had a catch for 12 yards. I mean, they were bad in the first half. They had 4 punts, a missed field goal, and a fumble after they kicked the field goal on their opening drive, then punt, missed field goal, fumble. But then they bounced back in the second half. They had 3 touchdowns, and Ripien went 21 of 26, 197 yards, a touchdown, and 95 passer rating. He had a really bad throw that was intercepted at the goal line, but then the defense recovered. They got the ball back with a 3-and-out, and then he led 2 more touchdown drives following that mistake. That's all you can ask for. You make a mistake, you bounce back. This year, what's really hurt them, they've not had one offensive lineman start every game. They have 2 former starters that are on injured reserve. They had 3 offensive linemen leave Sunday's game injured. One of the players came in to replace them. He left with a back injury. So their offensive line does not look good. I don't know what the hell to do in this game, Aaron.
Yeah. No idea. It's kind of like the scheduling of when Christmas dinner.
Right?
It's
Because this
kind
game
of
they thought was going to be a good game.
I
Early
think
in the year, you think Russell Wilson against with the good Broncos team against the returning Super Bowl champs. This should be a good game. No.
yeah, I mean, I look at it like this. This is my thought process. If you are the Broncos, why do you play Russell Wilson right here? They have
I don't,
no, you know what I mean? You
why
have
not?
no
Ripien looked okay too.
and is Mark Ripien really should be laying points on the road? I don't think so.
Or
Rams
is it
offense is
Brett? Is
too
it Brett?
good.
Is it Mark? Did you say Mark? I
I
think it's
said
Brett,
Mark, yeah.
right?
I met Mark Ripken once at a Washington D.C. Hooters.
That's great. That's
That's
great.
another story, but
But this is a stay away for me.
the
I just
to me this is dog or pass.
me too. Rams are past, but just
Dog or pass. I mean, I try
the
to dive
Broncos
in to
defense is
find some stuff, and I can't find anything. Maybe this is the game where if you can get 50-1 or over, you play no TD.
yeah, you're right. Because the Broncos defense is good, so the Rams just may have a hard time moving the ball at all. Let's get to Sunday Night Football. Tampa versus Arizona. We have Tampa as a 7.5 point favorite on the road in here. Over under in this game is 40. The Bucks are 6-8 straight up, 3-10-1 against the spread. Arizona 4-10 straight up, 6-8 against the spread. McCoy got hurt for the Cardinals last week. They're down to their third string quarterback, McSorley. They got a big game from J.J. Watt. He had 3 sacks. He actually has 9.5 on the season. It's the highest number he's had since 2018. He also had 3 tackles, 3 quarterback hits, a pass defended, and a forced fumble in that game. They had 5 different defenders finish with at least 1 quarterback pressure. And they couldn't move the ball at all, though. They had 1 drive during the whole first half that went more than 20 yards. But on the Tampa side, they should be a 7.5 point favorite on the road against anyone. I mean, they got up 17-0 in the second quarter. They were looking really good at that point. Brady was 89-0 in home games that he led by 17 plus points, including the playoffs, before blowing that lead to the Bengals. In the second half, they had 5 consecutive turnovers, and 4 of them were Brady's fault. He fumbled twice. He threw 2 interceptions. They also mishandled a fake punt. They had a defensive holding call that took away a big sack that they got. That was a 23-yard sack. They jumped off sides late in the game with 2 minutes left. And Smith, their offensive lineman, he leads the league in penalties for offensive linemen. He has 11 total penalties, 6 holding, 4 false starts, 1 illegal use of hands to the face. Think about the 2 games they've won recently. They had to come back late in both of those games to barely beat the Rams and the Saints in those games. They're terrible on 3rd and long. They are 4 of 42 this year on 3rd or 4th down and 10 plus yards to go. They've also been sacked 4 times in that situation. It was the first time since 2011 that Brady committed 4 turnovers in a game, all of them in the second half, all on 4 consecutive drives. And they gave Cincinnati the ball 4 times in a row in Tampa Bay territory. They just scored boom, 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 real quick. They gave up 34 unanswered points. This is the first time a Brady team has ever lost 8 games in a year. If they lose 1 more, it'll be the first time he's ever had a losing record as a starting quarterback. He's ranked 31st among qualifying quarterbacks this year in yards per attempt. They're just not getting the ball down the field. They're getting the ball out quickly. They don't look good. I don't love Arizona as a team, but I could not lay 7.5 with the Bucks in this game.
Yeah, I'm dog or pass for me here. Brady as the Bucks quarterback laying 3 points or more is only 39% ATS. You got Kingsbury as a dog, 64% ATS. I know there's been a little spike in the number because Trey McSorley is going to be starting. But yeah, dog or pass.
I was gonna say, like, I'm not laying the number, but we've got a pretty good slate of games. It seems like we like better than this one, right? Like, I'm not dying to get in on this game. If I have to, I would lean to the Cardinals there. As we finish up with Monday Night Football, Chargers and the Colts. Couple of big games for the Chargers recently. They're now 8-6. They're 8-5-1. They are in the playoffs as we stand right now, and they have one of the easiest schedules left in the league. Indy 4-9-1 straight up, 6-8 against the spread. Oh man, with the Colts. What happened last week? And now keep in mind, it's last week they covered. They still covered that game. They lost. They were up 33-0 at
I have
halftime.
never had to sweat out a 4.5 more in my life
Me
when it's
neither. I could not believe what was happening. But you could sort of just see the way that the score was, that we probably weren't going to lose in regulation. But then when we went to overtime, I was like convinced that it was going to be a
Oh my
loss.
God. I
was
already
convinced.
had a loss.
Me too. There have been 59 times since 2000 that a team had been leading by 30 or more points at halftime. But the difference between the Colts and all those other teams, the Colts actually had negative EPA on offense, even though they were up 33-0. That meant that the lead was built on a less stable foundation. That was from Mike Sando at The Athletic. So all of the other 58 teams had been winning games, whereas the Colts were just sort of being handed that game. Now, in the second half, they threw an incomplete on a 2nd and 7. Minnesota was able to get the ball back before the third quarter ended. Then in the fourth quarter, on their own 2-yard line, incompletion on first down, incompletion on third down. They had a drive that was less than a minute. If they just run, 45 seconds, 45 seconds, 45 seconds. Like, that's what you're doing at that point, and then you punt. Then with 2 minutes and 45 seconds left, one of their players stepped out of bounds. That cost them another 40 seconds of game time. They had a 4th and 1 where they did a quarterback sneak with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. Probably would have been smarter to kick the field goal there and go up by 2 scores. 1 minute and 20 seconds left. The Colts commit a false start penalty with 12 seconds left on the play clock. Quote, this was from one of the articles I was reading, and it was quoted from NFL executives. This is what happens when you hire people with no experience. Hell, in the second half, Minnesota even threw an interception and turned the ball over on downs, and they still couldn't win that game. They received a block punt for a touchdown, a fumble that was lost near the red zone from Minnesota, a botched fake punt that led to a score, and a pick six. They scored 5 of their first offensive possessions, but they did have to go 5 of 5 on field goals throughout the game. They gave up 31 unanswered points. They even had 6 possessions in the fourth quarter. They got the ball 6 times. They were held to 4 plays in 5 of them. They were held to 4 plays in 5 of 6 of those drives. They had a late game fumble that should have been a touchdown return. They even got lucky. They had a play that was called dead that shouldn't have been called dead against them. And now we know Taylor left the game. He's been on IR. Week 13 against Dallas, they gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter. They allowed 54 points in that game, which was the most ever in the fourth quarter. And then they come off of the largest blown lead in NFL history. Last week, they gave up plays of 64 yards, 63 yards, 35 yards, 21 yards, all in the second half. And they only had 132 yards in the final 40 minutes of that game in the second half in overtime. Now the Chargers, God, this feels like a Charger flat spot after a couple big wins to now feel like they got a really good stranglehold on things, because they have a nice, easy schedule coming up at the Colts, Rams, and then at the Broncos. 3 of the worst teams in the league that are really struggling right now. Herbert did not have a great game last week, but he had a fantastic late drive, and he hit this pass to Mike Williams, 32 seconds left in a tie game. He was running down the sideline. The play had just a 22% completion probability percentage. He is now the first player in NFL history with 4,000 plus passing yards in each of his first 3 seasons. And they went on that drive, the game-winning drive, with no timeouts, 48 seconds left. He completed 3 straight passes for 57 yards. That put him in field goal range. And they had a nice drive to start the game. Then they got cold. They had to punt 5 times in their next 7 possessions, but they got the 3 and out, which allowed, and they actually allowed the Titans to score and to tie the game. And then they ended up driving down. So they couldn't even ice the game there. We've seen them a few times this year not be able to ice games. They're still playing without Derwin James, Rashawn Slater, Joey Bosa. I mean, everybody in the world is laughing at the Colts, talking about how bad the Colts are. Nobody wants to play the Colts in this game, right, Eric?
Nobody wants to play the Colts. Look, Staley is a favorite, 45%. 3 points or more, 33%.
This is another spot. This is
Colts,
another spot for the Colts.
the Colts are here. They're starting Nick Foles, who literally hasn't taken any first team reps since the preseason. This is just an ultimate, hey, you know what? We're tanking. We're done. We're trying to try to get the best draft pick. I like Foles. People like him. People play for him. But it's just so hard to trust this Colts team, this Colts franchise. This is just going to be a pass. I know that Zach Moss, his props will be inflated. Maybe look to a Jackson because he's going to get the receiving work. Maybe a Jackson like receiving and rushing prop total. Maybe look that way. You talked about that throw Herbert made. I mean, that just showed like when you have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, that's going to open stuff up because we saw how valuable Williams was. There was nothing on that play. All Williams did was just point straight up and was just like, hey, give me the ball. You were talking about Herbert, and one of my friends, he made this comment to me. He goes, imagine being the guy in the Dolphins scouting room saying, hey, I think the smaller, slower, less athletic guy that's left-handed is going to be a better prospect than Justin Herbert.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, it just, I don't know. Like, I like this Chargers team a lot, but this is just a typical flat spot.
Yeah.
If this is just dog or pass for me.
Me too.
Like I said, I'll look at some Jackson props, maybe some guy you don't even know what wide receiver he's going to target. You know what I mean? Like,
that's
I would look at Jackson props. That would be it.
So it looks like we've got Jets on the money line, which is like -1, Bears plus 8.5, Pats plus 3, Titans -3, Commanders plus 7.
Sounds good.
Those are our 5 for this week. Thank you so much, buddy, for helping us out again, and a very happy holiday to you and your family. But you and I will be talking in the next few days. We're recording this Wednesday night. I'm going to play it on social media right after. We will do our Thursday Twitter space, right? 2:00 Eastern time, where we preview the Thursday night football game.
I may have a dental appointment, so we may need to talk about that.
Yeah, you tell me. So we'll play it by ear. Keep an eye out if we do a Twitter space. It will be at 2:00 Eastern time ish or so. If not, if we do it a different time, we'll keep you posted. Follow me and Eric on social media. It's me, Gino B, and at etoft21. Eric, just give us some other thoughts on what's going on for you the next few days.
Podcast hopefully will be coming out if I don't lose power here, because allegedly the world's ending here in Michigan with the snow. And then my stream will be out on Tuesday of next week.
Another big thank you, Eric, for all the help you've given this year again. Appreciate it, buddy. You've become one of the best friends I have over the last few years. Love talking sports with you, and good luck to you this week. We'll be talking again, and hope you have a really nice Christmas with the family.
Thanks. You too, man. Appreciate you. Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Okay, folks, we'll be back to talk about NFL Week 17. If you're listening on That's What G Said podcast, don't go anywhere. Still a lot more on the podcast to come. Good luck this weekend.